This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast, brought to you by Hoxo Media. And I'm so excited to welcome back to our channels today a guest who's been on previously. This is Neil Carberry, who is the Chief Executive Officer for the Recruitment Employment Confederation. And when he was on previously, he agreed to come back on when we seemed to be heading out of lockdown. And you've stood by your word, Neil. Thank you so much for joining us again today. How are you?
Real pleasure to be with you again, Leisha. Well, like to back up what I say, and
You do?
really good actually. It's been a tough few months for everybody, perhaps more psychologically than in the business. I think the sense across the industry is that the January to March was actually not as bad as maybe we all feared it might be when we went into lockdown. But the winter months, not being able to go out, all of that stuff took its toll. But the sun's shining outside the window now. Demand is up. The industry is getting lots of good coverage. I think it's a good time to dip back in.
I agree with you totally. And I re-listened to our podcast, and we will make sure we share the links to that, where we were talking about the impact on the industry. And you're absolutely right. I think that everybody predicted that lockdown 3 would be absolutely, catastrophic. But actually, it's almost a disparity between the psychological effects, because I do agree with you. I think lockdown 3 was much harder on people because we all felt a lot more isolated because we couldn't go out and about as much as we could do in the summer lockdown. So yeah, I think it's great to put some context around that. And I think having spoken to you offline before we started recording now, I think we're both feeling a very similar sentiment coming at it from sort of the overview that we both have of the industry. So thank you. And obviously in other news, you've had a haircut, so that in itself is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's progressively less of my hair to cut, so it's quite easy to get it done quite quickly.
You're looking very.
Thank you very much. But that point about the recovery, the story, and we don't want to be I told you so at the REC, but the story of the first quarter of the year across all of the Western G7 economies is economies outperforming the expectations at the beginning of the year, and that's because we've adapted to doing business online in lockdown scenarios. So it's certainly the case that across the membership we saw positive numbers on temp right the way through January, February, March. The bounce we were anticipating in January for perm became a bounce in March. So we flatlined for a couple of months, and then now it's bounced back. So the general feeling's really positive about people starting to invest in their businesses again. Of course, as clients invest in their businesses, they come to the industry.
Of course they do. And of course, the vaccine rollout has been a huge success, and we applaud the NHS and the government for the fact that I think the UK is leading the way in the globe at the moment in terms of the vaccination. Have you been done?
I haven't. It is literally the only thing that's making me feel young, which is I am a grand total of 9 months short of being 45. So I'm afraid I'm still a whippersnapper when it comes to
this. And there you go. So I had mine a month ago. So because we had a little window in Bury where if you were between 45 and 50, you could get in, and I did. So I'm half done. As we record this, I'm half done. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful. But all the vulnerable people have been done, which is the most important thing. So, and I think it does tie in. I think the fact is that COVID was an economic and a health crisis. And, recruitment and the fact that we are job creation and we support employment across the industry, that's one of the key reasons that, you're just such a valuable guest for us to have on as a we're thought leadership for the recruitment industry, aren't we? So I think going forward now, I think the important thing is to talk about the recovery, but let's just talk about sort of normalizing the role of the industry. So I think it's, and I want to put some context. We talked off camera about, possibly preceding our recruitment careers, that there was some sort of legislation, or there were definitely rules to entry, sort of pre-1980s recruitment, which, you and I didn't work through that. But I think, this sort of concept of this barrier to entry and where the recruitment industry sits, where you can't become a lawyer, you can't become a doctor without having the right to become one. So what are your views generally? And then what is the REC doing to ensure that there are suitable barriers as a recruitment business to be allowed to trade, basically?
That's a really interesting question. And it's a critical thing, actually. One of the things we're doing at the moment as the industry ramps up is we're running our Essentials of Recruitment law again. Because I do think that being really clear on the fact that it is a highly regulated industry, we have our own act, And now, if I call it the 1973 Act, it'll probably turn out to be the 1974 Act. I can never remember which year it is, but plus the conduct regs that everyone will know from the early 2000s. So there is a lot of regulation. You get into certain sectors and you've got licensing through the Gangmasters Licensing and Labour Abuse Authority. So there is a really complex compliance web in the industry already. What there is, but it's all associated with the corporate. It's not associated with the individual. And this debate about should we license has been around for a while. On balance, I think we are better off not licensing companies' operations. But I do think that the payoff of that is we have to make sure that we're investing in individual recruiters and their understanding of their responsibilities.
Yes, of course.
It's interesting you ask me this right now. You might be aware, Alicia, the REC has a compliance test that all members have to take. The deadline for that, for REC members listening, is June the 30th. So you have to get the test done by then, or I'm coming around your house. But that piece around how can we demonstrate as an industry our compliance with good practice, whether it's on holiday pay, whether it's on how we issues like inclusion, diversity, whether it's on the correct structuring of contracts. You know, our team have spent a lot of time over the last couple of months getting all the contracts people need for the IR35 changes this month up on the REC website to make sure people keep themselves safe. I think the thing people coming into the industry fresh might not realize is how much work there already is, how big the barriers already are to doing it well. And I think we need to encourage people to take that seriously. Now, personally, I don't think licensing is the right way to do that. That's certainly not the opinion that the REC has taken for many years. But I think if we don't get it right, government will look at licensing. So I think this whole piece on getting our compliance right is super important from that point of view. It's actually also important from a client point of view as well, because I think the industry is moving away from just get it done and get it done quickly into a much more advisory, much more professional services mindset. You're seeing some really great initiatives coming up in staff shortage sectors where firms are using an employ, train, deploy model for staff in IT or in engineering for contractors and temps. That kind of thing is going to become more and more normal. So you are going to get recruitment industry leaders who are absolutely in that space we've discussed before, Alicia, of being advisors to clients in the way that solicitors or accountants are. And if we want that to be the case, we have to be training our people. We have to be really hot on the compliance, and we have to be able to articulate why we do things the right way. Otherwise, I think we will end up with some kind of licensing regime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think it's, for me to normalise the role and, see myself as a professional services provider, is that a mindset thing, or is that just because I am fully compliant? And, I think it's about engaging that. But if we think about, the big issue, I guess we talked again about this off camera, is attracting talent into the market, because ultimately, it's the same for any perm recruiter. It doesn't matter what your sector is, you're talent short. How do we attract and retain the best recruitment talent and ensure that those people are complying with what best practice looks like? And that's why, the REC for me is an essential, benchmark for external people to understand that we are complying with the regulations that there are in place. And I think it's really important. And you bring a really important point up there. We look at automation, we look at how, these recruitment advisors and the best practice people out there are incorporating all of that. So what are you seeing in terms of using technology? Because it's there. And then that is, for me, that's what's transformed our sector in the most phenomenal way. We're doing this now on Zoom, it's become part and parcel, but also in terms of, candidate attraction, CRM systems, ATS, what do you see as that balance, that fine balance between automation and that human influence, which ultimately, strip everything else down, that's what we're here to do.
We were talking before about a recent Moneybox Live I did, talking about automation and recruitment, and there's a real sense that automation is inevitable in the industry, and it is. You know, the process automation is good for efficiency. It's good for clients and for candidates. It means candidates get answers quicker. It means clients get solutions quicker. But process speed isn't, you know, we're not selling paper clips. Process speed isn't everything. It's more about advisory and bringing on people into jobs in a tight labour market. And I keep telling people that not to be fooled by rising unemployment at the moment. We've had the biggest recession in 200 years, and unemployment will peak lower than it did after the great financial crisis. If you take into account the changing inflow to the country post-Brexit in terms of people coming in, there's some debate out there about whether people have gone home in big numbers. So there's clearly some, but I don't think it's as big as maybe it's been made out. But also, you know, 50% more people were born in 1965 than were born in 1977.
Right.
The baby boomers retiring is a really big and fundamental change in our labour market. So I think any business, whether recruiter or client business, needs to be thinking about the labour market generally shrinking as it changes shape. That means that talent attraction and landing people is going to be ever more important. That brings your recruitment marketing up, but it also means that it's still a people business first and foremost.
Of course it is.
So the way I'd frame it is, the technology's coming, and we have to harness it, and it has lots of benefits. But fundamentally, we as an industry add value by the humanity side of what we do. And you know, we just published our recruitment and recovery campaign report. The campaign runs through the year. It points out just what an impact good recruitment has on the British economy. We're talking about 80 billion of gross value added. We're talking about, you know, billions of pounds of potential productivity gain to the UK if we get recruitment right. All of that pushed out very much to the client side, but also that's about, coming back to your first question, us doing things the right way. The best example of this, I think, is in AI and recruitment. Now, there's lots of people who talk about doing AI and recruitment now, and most AI that you see is actually advanced automation at the moment. But AI is coming in a really significant way. That could be great. It could improve process efficiency magnificently. It could improve job matching. It could get people into work quicker. It could meet client needs quicker.
Yes.
Equally, it could bake in some biases that are fundamentally unfair and that pull the rug from the whole thing. And we end up with legislation from government restricting the use of AI in recruitment processes. Now, that's what the REC is for, actually, is kind of in that world, we need to stand up for the industry. We've been doing some work with a government body called the Centre for Data Ethics and Innovation on exactly this.
Wow.
So it comes right back to your first question, which is we've got to own the solutions, and the solutions being human-led and fair, as well as process efficient. Otherwise, other people will do it for us. And that's really the kind of the call to action of kind of getting involved with the REC and helping us work our way through this. You know, we've been through the last year, and by and large, the industry has done itself a power of good. You know, keeping those supply chains in food going, getting people into the NHS. You know, we had NHS England come into the REC Healthcare Group and tell the REC Healthcare Group that they couldn't have done it without them. Don't think we'd have been there in the past. We now need to build on that. I think there's a real opportunity for us all as an industry to walk tall. And that's really what our campaign's about.
That's incredible, and that was very nicely linked, actually, because that was going to be my next question to you. So I think you're absolutely right. And you know, what's interesting is that is the sort of movement around ethics. You know, there's an awful lot of talk around diversity and inclusion, and you know, the only way that we can ensure that as an industry we are leading the way with the end user clients, so encouraging people to not just have it as a badge of honor, but actually to truly be inclusive, to ensure that you're attracting those hidden talent pools. And the reality is as well, and we haven't sort of planned to speak about this, but we think about the education system. Every single, you know, the baby boomers are retiring. There's an absolute shortage of skills across a multitude of industries, particularly technology. What are we doing as recruiters to educate and to make sure it cascades down to the youth coming through? And I think it's we could talk about this forever, couldn't we? It's absolutely vital.
It's hugely important, and that next generation point is is incredibly vital, because while I am generally pretty positive about where the labour market is, you've heard me already today talk about, unemployment peaking much lower than we might have expected, returning to a tight labour market quite quickly. There is an enormous underlying problem, which is one group in particular have been hideously badly affected by the last year, and that's young people.
Yeah.
So 57% of the fall in employment over the last year is delivered by those aged between 16 and 24.
Yeah,
so it's been tough for all of us in all sorts of ways, but the lower employment that we're seeing is coming out of that age group. Now, partially that's because this recession uniquely hits the sectors in which young people work.
Yeah.
Hospitality,
retail,
leisure.
Yeah.
And some of that might be eaten up by kind of getting those sectors open again.
Of course.
But it's also about the fact that we've now had 2 leavers years where demand for people who are earlier career is lower. And we know in recruitment, and you'll know from your business, Leisha, that there's been a real scrabble from firms to find consultants to bring on board to meet this demand that we're now seeing, particularly experienced consultants.
Absolutely.
People feel less confident about starting people who are new to the industry at the moment, at least partially, of course, because they want to have a team around them to support them when they come in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's why one of the, probably the thing that's taken most of my time over the last couple of weeks is talking about office reopening with government.
Yeah.
And someone blabbed about it to the FT. There's an FT article from last week about one of the meetings that we had with government. But that piece around reopening offices being really important to people's mental health, being really important to early career workers, even those you're already employing who might be sitting working on their bed in a house share.
Definitely.
We talk about how we normalizing getting people back into workplaces, even if it's a hybrid, is going to be really important.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. I mean, that's probably the most singularly the biggest talk topic for me, from both my hiring clients and also potential candidates coming on the market. It's this: what does it look like as we exit out of the lockdown? And I think that the hybrid model it's got to be adopted by people, because ultimately, whether you are, I'm 20 odd years in, or whether you're 2 years in, we are sociable people, and we all learn through osmosis, and we're more productive when we're around each other. It's as simple as that. You're more likely to share information on a candidate or a client with your colleague than you are if you were to pick up the phone and do it. So I think it will transform the opportunities for the entry-level people. And interestingly, and we are the barometer as a REC, we are seeing now the shift back to clients having that conversation with us, by the way, as well as looking at experienced people. If you have anybody that's looking to get into recruitment, they'd have to be exceptional, all these things, that's fine. We're having those conversations again. It's really encouraging. The first time we had that conversation, it was only a few weeks ago. We were just like, really? Did we really just have that conversation? And we shouted about it on LinkedIn because it's a good sign. We're both parents. I'm a parent. My daughter's about to leave school, which hopefully with a handful of GCSEs, which is a miracle. And I can already see, she's talking about getting herself a part-time job. I did it back in the 80s and 90s. I had a part-time job, and I've just said, at the moment, you're going to be way behind all the adults that need to get themselves back into work. And the reality is that that's the group of people that we all collaboratively need to be thinking about, regardless of your sector, regardless of it's about that next generation. So I think it's, and let's face it, they'll be the adopters of automation. They will be the ones that will have the balance without even thinking about it, because they've grown up around it.
Well, they are the digital natives, aren't they? You and I are both in that generation that have a digital adulthood and an analog childhood.
Yeah.
And I, like you, did sort of shifting stuff around in the co-op for £2.16 an hour as a Saturday job, and of course a lot of that has gone by the by. The same's true. Talking about the baby boomers retiring, one of the things that the baby boomers had because you can say what you like about British Rail, British Leyland, British Steel, and the British Coal Board, and in many ways they were basket cases, but they were excellent training schools. So you had a lot of people going through those businesses and getting some really excellent training, and that has sustained lots of the economy for a long time since, and we haven't quite replaced that. It's why actually reforming the apprenticeship levy and getting the support for training right is such a big REC priority. Because if we can get that going and start to get some of that levy funding flowing to people earlier career, perhaps in shorter courses that just help boost them into jobs, I think that will start to change the picture.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Well, I mean, I'm a huge advocate of that. My youngest is only 14, but she is definitely going to be going into recruitment apprenticeship at 16. I'll push her through her GCSEs. So I'm a huge believer in that. And, you know, just on behalf of the whole industry, you know, a huge thank you to everything that the REC does, because you are quite literally, you know, world class in the way that you advise government to make sure it's policies, but you also ensure it's the reality for the, you know, multi-billion-pound sector that we're both such proud supporters of and champions of. And thank you so much for taking time, because I know you're exceptionally busy. We'll make sure all the links to the REC are shared, as always, on our podcast and YouTube channel. And wishing you all the best, Neil, and it's really nice to see you again.
Look, Leisha, it's a pleasure to be able to join you. All of the credit for the REC's work goes to our great team who've done an amazing day. I'm going to say this up front. They're having a day off on April the 30th. We've decided they're all having an additional day off.
Right.
Because they've been Trojans for a year. So we're putting in place the processes to make sure that doesn't disturb members' advice or anything like that. But we decided that rather than giving everyone an extra day's leave, because we're an internal email generation machine, if everybody's off, no one's inbox is internally getting any bigger. So we're doing that on April 13th. They absolutely deserve it, because all of that work is driven by them. But at the end of the day, it's members' organisation. So, you know, the people who drive it are recruitment businesses across the country. And I think I've said to you before, the phone never rings enough. It could ring all day and it wouldn't ring enough with people asking what the REC can do to help. We are here to be recruiters' organisation. Yeah,
that's wonderful. And that's my sentiment. And given our audience, our recruitment leaders and aspiring leaders, you know, I applaud all of you. We're all doing our best, but we're all changing people's lives, and that's what it's all about. So thank you so much, Neil. Really appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
See you soon.